Hey guys, Garrett McLaughlin here, and today I want to walk you through a very simple exercise progression on how to build lateral core and hip strength with the side plank. The side plank is one of the best exercises out there, but I think if we take the opportunity to progress past specifically improving core strength to then go to some of the single leg variations with the side plank, we can really increase hip strength in the glutes and hip abductors. So in this series, I'm going to walk you through a very simple step-by-step progression for you to see better core and hip strength. The first exercise in this side plank progression is the modified side plank, and we all have to start somewhere. So this is for those of you that might have trouble with the traditional side plank. How do you take a step back and really challenge core strength from a modified position? So modified side plank, very simply, is we're going to shorten the lever. So if you go from a regular side plank position here, instead of legs fully extended, just going to bend the knees. When you bend the knees though, need to make sure we're not sitting back into the hips. There should be no angles here. Hips forward, knees, hips, shoulders in a nice straight line. From there, what we're going to do is push away from the ground with the shoulder. Use the outside of the knee as that fulcrum point. Lift the hips up so I'm nice and straight and not trying to over exaggerate that position. Just get nice and aligned here and hold. Again, doing this variation, building up from wherever you are, 20, 30, all the way up to 60 seconds. Doing that on both sides. If you notice any weaknesses on one side versus the other as you move through this progression, make sure to add an additional set to that, regardless of the exercise that I show you, just to make sure you're balancing from left to right or vice versa. The next exercise in this progression is the side plank, okay? So traditional side plank is now in a more of a long lever position, legs fully extended rather than knees bent, as I showed in the modified version a second ago. So as you set up here, knees, hips, shoulders, ankles, everything here in a nice long line. Need to make sure we're really using the outside of the shoe here to place pressure into the ground. So I don't want to, I see a lot of people come up and they're placing pressure on the outside of the ankle. This is very important in this step on the side plank, because as we progress to some of these single leg variations, if you do not have a proper position of the foot and the ankle to give yourself support, it's going to be very challenging to progress through these single leg variations and build hip strength. You'll almost be working against yourself. So as you get into the side plank position, same thing, push away from the ground. I like to use my top foot to help set up that shoe in the proper position. So I have a little space between the outside of the ankle and the ground. Corner of the shoe is pushing down, and then from there, nice straight legs, hips forward, engaging core, and holding that position. Just like before, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, building up to 60. Doing that on both sides, and if you notice any weakness from one side versus the other, really trying to target that weakness with one more additional set. So now that you've mastered the modified side plank and the traditional side plank, it's time to take the next step, which is adding more of a single leg emphasis. Why I like this single leg emphasis is because the muscles of the lateral hip, the glutes, the hip rotators, the TFL, all these muscles there are super important when it comes to performance, injury prevention. Very important for runners really functioning in single leg stance to have that balance and that stability. So this is a very good next step for most people when it comes to the side plank, rather than sticking with just traditional core training exercises. So when you go into and add a single leg focus here, I always like to take a step back, because what I'm finding is going from a full side plank to then a single leg lift, that progression from those two exercises is very challenging. We're going from holding with 2 feet, all of a sudden cutting that in half, and now only using that bottom hip to provide the support to stay up. So what I like to do in this instance is actually go modified again. We're going to take a step back with the side plank, go up into that modified side plank we showed earlier, straighten out the top leg, and then from here with this shortened lever, knee through shoulder, I can then go into that top leg lift, okay? So exercise I call lateral elbow stabilization. This is the modified version, going through anywhere from 8 to 20 repetitions, just starting where you're at, trying to add 2 repetitions per week, and just continuing to build strength at that lateral hip. More so, it's very important to try to connect with and feel the proper muscles as you're doing that. So as you get down into your side plank position, I don't want to just perform this movement. I want to actually try to feel like I'm driving that bottom knee into the ground. I'm engaging that lower side hip, the glutes, and I'm using those muscles to provide the support to keep me up there in the air. That is the first step to going to the full long lever single leg side planks. Now that you've mastered the modified lateral elbow stabilization, it's time to take the next step. Very simple next step, but hard exercise where we perform the long lever variation. So this is the traditional side plank, but now we're gonna raise and lower the top leg. So a lot of demand on that bottom leg to provide support. We're getting these glutes, obliques, QL, abdominals, a lot of these muscles around the core and hip to work together, which is the biggest reason I like to add different single leg side plank variations into the mix, because we're connecting the trunk and the hip for these things to work better from a strength and stability standpoint. So when we're performing this lateral elbow stabilization, setting up in your traditional side plank, nothing's changing, pushing away from the ground, nice straight position, making sure, especially here, corner of the shoe digging into the ground. Again, this will be very challenging, but if I can set up, use the corner of that shoe, give myself some space away from the ground, I can then see more success as I raise and lower. So what I like to do with this one is actually repetitions, lifting and lowering, because it provides a quick second if you need to adjust the foot position, rest the bottom hip. It's a good gateway to completing this exercise truly on one leg without having that little rest in between. So going through, depends how many repetitions. A lot of people here, this is an exercise when it comes to reps. I start people at a whole different range of repetitions, right? Some people start at, hey, let's just do 4 per side. Other people are ready immediately to jump into 10, 12, or 15. People are all across the board when it comes to lateral hip strength. So you have to find where you are as far as repetitions. Start with something that's easy to complete, that you can feel like you're engaging that lower side core and hip, and then build from there, rather than automatically jumping into a really hard exercise and fighting yourself when it comes to proper exercise form and technique. So nice and slowly getting up into your side plank, lift, lower. Another variable that you can manipulate is the time. I can make them quick, okay, if I feel like I'm really struggling, or 1, 2, 3, down. 1, 2, 3, down. So a couple variables that you can manipulate there to make it either easier or harder for you. But this is the next exercise in the progression. Stay tuned for the last exercise, which will take things to a whole different level. Okay, so now you worked on improving that lateral elbow stabilization, a very hard exercise. Usually takes people several months to become proficient at that. The next exercise is a single leg side plank with the top leg marching. So now we're going truly single leg stance here, or single leg support. We're not using that top leg to do anything besides move through this marching motion. What that marching motion is going to do is help challenge that bottom leg, because we're continuously moving through a single leg motion that we have to stabilize against. So if we start the same way, get the foot set up, elbow, push away from the ground, traditional side plank. From here, march up, march back, march up, march back. And make it harder. I'm not going to touch that leg down. I'm going to keep the leg elevated and go through a series of repetitions or a time for this one. So can do anything from 4 to 20 repetitions, can do 15 seconds all the way up to a minute on each side, depending on how you want to track that exercise. Very good exercise, especially for runners, as we start to integrate this marching motion. So we're looking at hip and core strength as that top leg goes through flexion and extension, very similar to what you'd be doing while running. So a good and challenging next step, which I like to take people to when they're ready. Okay, so that's it. That's the side plank progression in a very simple way, how to build lateral core and hip strength, really how to tie those areas together to see better strength, performance, and hopefully a reduction in injury. Why I like this is because these areas need to be working together as a unit in many instances. So it helps take you from traditional side planks and core exercises to really add that lateral hip and hip abductors into the mix. In a very good and healthy way. Most people we find really have trouble holding that single leg side plank, so that's what will bridge the gap to build more hip strength, to hopefully in the end you can hold a single leg side plank 20, 30, or even up to 60 seconds per side. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave a comment below or reach out directly. I hope you enjoyed this video.